Hi folks, Canadian Prepper here. Just had some tips for anybody who is planning on disembarking on the West Coast Trail based on my one-time experience with the trail. Now, I definitely am not an expert on the West Coast Trail like many of the locals would be, or many of the people who've done it more than once, but it is fresh in my mind, and I did take the time to explore and really sort of soak all the attractions in, if you could call them that, while I was there. So I think, I can offer at least a current perspective on what to expect when going to the West Coast Trail. I did go there in August of 2014. And there's a few things that I just wanted to remind people about that we sort of, the logistics sort of fell through for us on. Number one is arranging for, or at least expecting that you may have camping. Before, the day before, and the day after your excursion through the West Coast Trail, and that there are campgrounds on either side of the trail. So just keep in mind that if you, depending on the time you show up, it's kind of difficult to time it exactly right so that you arrive there, right at the orientation time, which I believe there's 2 every day during peak season, which is July, August. And, so you're going to want to make sure you time that right, but just prepare to fork out a little extra money for that campsite. And, towards the end of the trail, if you miss the bus, which is another thing I'm going to talk about, you may have to fork out some more money as well. Usually there's always campsites available, and if push came to shove, you could probably just squat somewhere for free. The second thing is the bus ride back. Now, this is another thing that we sort of tried to, I don't know if we just were willfully ignorant to, but when you hike the West Coast Trail, obviously, you're hiking it one direction. Most people, 99% of people, don't hike back down the trail to get back to their cars. So you're going to need a bus ride back, and typically that bus ride back is going to cost you between $80 and $120 to get driven back to your car. And that drive, depending on where you are parked, can take up to 4 or 5 hours. That's because there's some pretty nasty logging roads from Port Renfrew to Pachina Bay, which are the 2 entry points into the trail. So the trail runs north to south. On the north is Pachina Bay, and on the south is Port Renfrew. And you can start on either side of the trail. Thirdly, you'll want to keep in mind that there is parking, that you have to pay for parking. So if you park at the port, if you park in Port Renfrew, you're going to have to, there's this guy who charges people for parking. It's $5 a day. I didn't see any cars there vandalized or anything like that. It is on the, I can't remember which reserve it is, but it's right across from the Parks Canada office, which is, it's kind of a rundown looking building, but nonetheless it is a government run building, and there are government workers inside. And so just be prepared to fork out extra money for parking if you're planning on starting from Port Renfrew. If you're planning on starting from Pachina Bay, parking will be free, and it's actually a much more sort of cleaner, professional looking entry point. I think it's the main entry point to the trail. It's the one that most people will enter at. Which brings me to my next point, number 4. I would recommend people start on the south side of the trail, which is the Port Renfrew side, which is the side less started, I guess you could call it that. And the reason for that is that a lot of the hard stuff is on the south side. The north half is relatively straightforward, relatively easy, whereas on the south side of the trail, the south half of it, you have a lot of mud, you have a lot of ladders, you have a lot of bouldering, a lot of tricky, potentially dangerous hiking. And so it's, in my personal opinion, it's better to do that when you're fresh. It's better to get the hard stuff over with first. Some people will say that no, you should do the hard stuff when your pack is lighter towards the end of your trip, because you'll have eaten most of your food, and that's why most people start from the north, because by the time they get to the hardest part of the trail, which is the last 12K of the south, your bag is a bit lighter, and so you're able to do it. But honestly, what I found was you go in there with a 70-pound pack, which is what I went in with, which is a little more than normal, I should say. Most people pack in about 50. And it's still going to feel like 70 pounds, sort of, when you're on your way out. Because of the fact that, the compounding stress on your body over those 4 or 5 days, your joints might hurt by that time, your muscles might be sore, you might be cramping, you might be generally more, depressed, or you may just be tired, and and just not really motivated as much as you would be at the beginning. So that's why I would definitely encourage people to finish at the north and start at the south. And that way too, you finish on a good note. It's the last 12K of hiking. It couldn't be different. In the north, the last 12K is very easy. And in the south, it's the most difficult part of the trail. And in the north, it's the most easiest part of the trail. So I would rather finish with the easiest stuff. And we were able to pound out 23 kilometers in one day. That might not seem like too much, but when you're carrying a 70-pound pack, it's a significant amount of... actually, I think my pack was down to about 55 at that point, because I had eaten all my food. So... and it's a lot of elevation changes, and in and outs, cutbacks, a lot of slow terrain, but much easier than the north, than the south. Getting things confused. Other things to consider, if you're not a big fan of the rain, I would encourage you to go at the end of July, early August. Apparently, those are the only 2 weeks out of the year that you can expect to see a whole lot of sunlight. We lucked out in that there was absolutely no rain throughout our whole trip, so that was fantastic. I was actually hoping for a bit of rain just to sort of, experience the agony of the trail in all its fullness. But we got lucky, and we experienced some of the best weather the West Coast has to offer for that time of year. Any other time of the year, it's rainy, it's foggy. The locals there have a term called Fogust. Another thing to remember is that, just to give you a rundown of the prices for food, there's 2 places where you can buy food along the way. Very sort of, informal. It's not like a store in the sense that you're used to. It's just a bunch of tents, and there's chocolate bars, pop, chips, maybe a bit of alcohol. Chez Monique, I believe, is at kilometer 46. So that's about, approximately, if you were starting in the south at Port Renfrew, it would take you, a few days to reach her. And you could buy a hamburger there. It's going to cost you $20. Sounds a little pricey, and I personally wasn't into it, but a lot of people do it, because by that time you want a hot meal, it's cooked for you, and to each their own. You can also get chocolate bars, pop and chips. You can buy alcohol, beer, energy drinks, stuff like that. But it is all a little more expensive, and the hamburgers being the most expensive. You can also get a cup of coffee there. The next store is what they call the Crab Shack, and the guy there is the guy who also ferries you across there's a point there where you have to be ferried across. It only takes like 2 minutes. He's going to try to sell you a bunch of stuff. He's a good guy. He's very knowledgeable. He'll sit there and talk with you, but I guess he's got to make his money too. So they have crab, halibut, salmon, all those things, and you can buy those. I think it's like $30 for the meal, which seems expensive too. But then again, you think about it, you go to a restaurant, and it's going to be cost you a similar amount for halibut and stuff like that. So something to consider there. Other than that, there was no bugs on the trail, so I don't think you're going to need bug deterrent. You will need toilet paper. There is no toilet paper on the trail, so don't bring bring lots of toilet paper. If you want to take pictures, you're going to need some kind of battery pack for your cell phone or your camera. That should go without saying. Solar power is a bad decision on the trail, I think. First of all, you're going to be hiking most of the day, and it's very difficult and a lot of that hiking is going to be in the bush, so you're not going to be exposed to a lot of sunlight, not even enough to really put a trickle charge down. So there isn't going to be any sedentary sunshine that is going to enable you to use that stuff during the day. So I would encourage just bring a battery pack, recharger, and that should do you well for that part of it. You don't really need to carry more than 2 liters of water at a time, I found, because there's so many creeks and rivers and things of that nature that you don't really need that. I started with a water filter, and I had 2. I had the Life Straw, I had the Sawyer water filter also, and at day 2 I just gave up on those and started using chlorine tablets, because it was so much easier to just put a tablet in the water than have to stand at the creek and at the end of the day filter out the water. And it's only a week, so I would strongly encourage, for simplicity's sake, use chlorine tablets. Bring lots of changes of socks. That's going to be the main thing. Definitely bring gaiters. You're definitely going to want gaiters. If you don't know what gaiters are, they're protection from your foot to your knee, essentially mud protection, and they keep the mud out of your boots. And there is a lot of frickin' mud, so you're going to want those without a doubt. Trekking poles, a lot of people swear that you need trekking poles for the West Coast Trail. Honestly, I used mine for the first 2 days, and I just found they really got in the way, because there's so many ladders and there's so many points where it's much more efficient to just use your hands to grab the foliage on the side, whatever you're looking at or wherever you're traversing through. I found that I just ended up putting my trekking poles in my backpack, and they may be helpful for your knees going downhill, but personally I found they were only useful 10% of the time, and I was just carrying them 90% of the other time, and the 10% just wasn't worth it. So, personally, in my opinion, trekking poles are not required on the West Coast Trail. That may be a subject for great debate. Who knows? I really don't care. Maybe somebody has some other rationale to prove me wrong. If you can get really ultralight ones, if you want to splurge, maybe that's not too bad. But honestly, there was only one creek that we had to cross, and it was like this little 6 feet of 1 foot deep water. Yeah, my feet got soaked, but big deal. You dry your boots out at night by the fire, and it's all good. And if you really wanted to, you could take your boots off and wade across barefoot. It wasn't something that you needed. There's so many different places, so many different options, and there's big logs along the whole beach. You and a friend could just throw a log across and walk over that. There's so many different options to getting across certain things. What else can I think of off the top of my head? you're going to want to make sure your ferry ride to the mainland, to Victoria or to Nanaimo, that you're prepared to do that. That's going to take a couple hours to get onto Vancouver Island. And it's going to cost you about $90 one way. It's going to cost you about $180 two ways. And so just factor that into your schedule. And make sure that you make reservations for your departure bus, because if that bus is full and you get there, me and my friend almost didn't get on the bus because it was almost full, and luckily we made reservations in time. So just consider that. And you can make reservations for the ferry as well. I've done that before and I've never actually seen it booked up yet, so maybe there are times when it is, but I haven't seen it yet. So wouldn't worry about that too much. Just consider that there is a time lag, and traffic can be kind of difficult in Victoria as well, so something to consider. Also, what else can I say about it? What else do you need to know? Well, if you have any questions about it, how about that? Just it's still pretty fresh in my mind because I'm just actually driving home now, so be sure to ask away, and I'll within the best of my knowledge, I will try to respond and offer you whatever I can. I do believe it's a great way to test your mental, emotional fortitude in the bush, and to test your ability to be without the spoils of civilization, and enhance your preparedness ability, enhance your survival skills, and just toughen you up a little bit and challenge yourself. So don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. If you have any questions, by all means, ask away. Canadian Prepper